We actually sit down and we say, what is the one thing, like a chorus in a song? They can't remember the verse, but if they can remember the chorus and they can see you a month later, they'll belt it back out at you. What is that? What's that remember statement? What's that 7 to 10 words? And some people call them foundational phrases. They'll use different terminology, but that is a key piece because once we know that and we know what we want the audience to do, then we can start writing the content. And that
Gotcha.
shifts when we're over on the other side.
Right.
Um,
Welcome to Sharpen the Spear podcast, where we help manufacturing executives command the front and win the floor. I'm Richard Walsh, creator of the Sharpened Impact methodology, and I spent decades helping leaders transform frontline teams, unlock hidden profit, and capture capacity they didn't even know they had. If you want to see where your leadership gaps are costing you and how to fix them, head over to grittolead.com and run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator today. Let's sharpen your edge and get started. And we are back on STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast, with another incredible guest. Patti Schutte's with us today. And Patti, no one knows Patti better than Patti. So, Patti, we need the backstory. Bring us up to speed and let's get into the conversation.
Sounds wonderful, Richard. And I've listened to your episode or different episodes, and I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I thought about how am I going to answer this? Because I could go so many different directions. And I realized I think the easiest way to say, what is Patti's backstory? What is her career journey? It's about I took the information I had and the moment I had it, I said yes, and I stayed curious. And when a new opportunity landed in my lap, I said, I think I'm going to figure this out because I really did not know what I wanted to do other than I was an analytical mind and I was really good with numbers. And so my life started by getting a math degree because that's what every presentation strategist does in their life is they go, "Ooh, I'm going to get a math degree and then become this big uber gubra speaker person." But what I have now realized is that has really served me well in working with the subject matter experts that I do in the space of presentations that I work in primarily now. But that was my first journey, and I was in the classroom. And you want to talk about one of the most struggling audiences to get results from, Richard? Try to get middle school and high schoolers to absolutely love mathematics and buy into the fact that they need to do really well on their state testing. So I look like a good teacher, and our state gets our funding and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, you would have hated me, Patti. Like all my math teachers hated me. Okay. I took 4 years to get through general math in high school. I mean, I had issues and numbers were not my thing. I have since become a much better numbers guy, but wow. Yeah, I wouldn't envy that job at all.
Yeah. And I enjoyed that job. And then, life happens. I had kids and I wasn't sure when to be in the classroom. And then an opportunity fell in my lap and it was with direct marketing. And I went to the top 2% of that organization, but that laid another foundation for my career and my business that I have now is because I realized really quickly I needed to be good at presenting, good at training, good at getting the next level of expertise out of the team I was working with, or I didn't get a paycheck. And of course, it really fueled my fire when they did really well. Yes, I did better, but I was more excited about how well they did. And that was the first time in my evolution of my career, Richard, that I am watching these people speak. They're saying this literally the same message, but it's the way they held the microphone, it's the way they turned, it was the strategy that they took to this presentation moment in time. And without knowing it, I was becoming a presentation strategist and scientist because I was going, ooh, if somebody did this, it got this out of the audience. Or if somebody did this in a sales moment, we got better results. And then I did that for a decade, had 3 kids, and I kind of got to the point, Richard, where I'm like, I know what it's going to take to get to the next level, and my heart wasn't in it. So I was wise enough to go, you know what? What could I potentially do next? And I reached out to someone who I knew that was in HR, and she said, Patty, let's put all your skills together. And I think you'd be an amazing corporate trainer. And I said, okay, sounds great. And I didn't end up as a corporate trainer. I ended up as a presenter manager for an organization. And my sole responsibility was to train, mentor, recruit. They were exponentially growing. I did audition events. At one point in time, Richard, I was known for as the Simon Cowell of that organization because you couldn't get to present for that particular organization if you didn't go through me and my systems. And then what happened after that is, once again, an opportunity landed in my lap, and I said yes. So somebody that I met at that organization went to a different organization, and she called me one day, and I thought we were going to chit chat and catch up. And she said, Patty, I've got a new job. I'm an event manager for this conference for this company. They've got these amazing electrical and mechanical engineers who are super brilliant, but when they go to present at my conference, they're not brilliant. And I've seen what you do. I know your work, and I need your help. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't even know what she was talking about. She literally wrote my first business plan for me, Richard. Like, I was like, what are my services? What am I doing? Like, I'm doing that in corporate America, but I never had thought about doing it myself until she reached out to me. And she said, well, you're going to train them virtually, and then you're going to do one-on-one coaching, and then you're going to come on site and support them on at this conference. And that was in 2011. And I had that conference every single year until we went through the COVID year, and then they tried one more time, and then it went away. And since then, my business has just blossomed, primarily referrals. But I really love to share that backstory to say I didn't wake up one day to say, "Ooh, I'm going to become a presenter strategist." It just happened. And I
Yeah.
really find myself in this world of when you talk about where are we going to sharpen, it's these subject matter experts who happen to have to present. Like they have these presentation moments, and we don't want to have a discrepancy or an imbalance when they go to stand in this presentation moment that their skills in any way get diminished. And that's what I absolutely love, but it's kind of been a unique journey.
That's really awesome. I've been like presenting doing some stuff like a little kid. Like I don't know why I just was drawn to that stuff, Um, I mean, not like all the time, but then with my business and I teach and I do seminars and I do all the same thing. But I'm just thinking about what you were just saying. You get these people who are SMEs, really good at what they do, but that doesn't mean they can put a mic in their hands and convey, and not because they don't know what they do, but because they're on a stage in front of 300 people, in front of 500 people, and they've never done it. And it's awkward, and they don't, and they're full of ums and all the stuff, and they're not moving around. They don't have the head contact or eye contact and everything, So it's kind of, and I see that, right? I'll see people like, ooh, this is their first or second time, So it's my first podcast 6 years ago or so. You get some guests that were a little shaky. I've even met people who literally they're presenting in front of like 50 or 60 of us. Okay. There was a woman, there was a 7-person panel. I think she was two of the 7 were women. She was
Mm-hmm.
head of like workforce development and all this stuff. And she's killing it. I mean, I'm like, man, she's unbelievable. And I know her and I'm talking to her and she got done. I go, you got to be on my podcast. She goes, oh, I'd have to get my nerve up for that. I'm like, you just spoke to 50 people like here, like you do it all the time. It was like, I go, you're going to be in your office on the computer and I mean, I'll be in mine. It's like, we're not, she goes, she couldn't pull the trigger on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. So I get where your position comes in. Because I never really thought about that as a position. I guess I may have, but never like, well, who's going to teach me how to present? Because I got to learn with all my mistakes and then fix it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is a lot of times in those situations where you're talking about where they don't know what to do on stage, it's because they don't have the formula. Like I have a process, I have a system. I'm very analytical. I know if I do this, this, and this, I can experiment with this and I can adjust that, and they know what to expect. But what I found is, call it my secret sauce, or just because I understand how their minds work, is, or most subject matter experts, it's like, okay, whoa, 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 there's a formula and there's a process. And that's what was really unique is because I didn't sit down and go, oh, I've got a system and oh, I had to figure it out. It's kind of like, what's the saying? Build the plane while you fly it too. That is exactly what I was doing. But what I was realizing early on when I was doing this work, it was taking me too long to get the noise and the loudness and all this stuff that was swirling around in their head. It was taking me too long to get to the good stuff and to narrow it down to, hey, in this 45-minute breakout session or on this panel discussion, this is what you need to be talking about. And I was smart enough because had been doing this work in corporate America. It's like, wait a second, Patty, you're finding that when you ask these certain questions in this certain order and in this certain way, it took you from two two 60-minute sessions of getting the good stuff out of them and getting them clear and clarity in their own mind to doing it in about 30 minutes. And that's when I knew I was onto something because one, I knew I could scale. But then I was like, ooh, I think I found a magic formula that can really help in these presentation moments. And that formula is now what's fun is as I've continued to use it and refine it, I now have clients that are using it in their marketing departments. They're not just using it in their presentation moments, but they're using that same clarifying process in their other key moments in their business world and their work world. And
That
go ahead,
no, I
Richard.
was
You're
just
going to
saying,
say
what's
something.
great about that is when we come up with things, I do similar things, and you got a thing. And like, oh, that kind of works. And then your thing kind of grows. And then you start seeing the applications. And it's way beyond what you started. You started to solve one problem. And that's the beauty of it about solving problems. It'll then correlate with another problem that you can use the same system with. I really like that, because I've done the same thing. I end up doing one little thing and it turned into a massive business.
Hmm.
Just I can solve this problem for like a whole industry.
Yeah.
How
Yeah. Because
cool
I
is that?
originally started out as just a conference speaker coach. Because again, I was doing my full-time position, which was similar work, but it was it was presentation moments across the whole spectrum of of the organization. So all the way from ideation, I was already around the table as the people were thinking, what are the products, what are the services we're bringing out? And then when we sat around with marketing, we sat around with sales. My job was to make sure there was product, sales, and presentation and element enablement across that whole cycle. So I was doing that while I was also now doing this business.
Right.
And you're right. I thought I was just going to have this conference piece and that's all I'm ever going to do. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, I was in a position where I was about ready to say no more to corporate because I had so many contracts going into 2020 that I was starting to find other people and making more patties and cloning myself and figuring out that system. And then everything went away. And then I stepped back and I said, ooh, I think I really need to think about this. What are other people, organizations? How could I take what I've created and give it more legs? And that's where I went through a lot of reflection. And over the last couple of years now, I've still doing the same work, but I have changed the way I talk about it and the way I offer it to business corporations and individual professionals is to say, how do you look at your presentation moments and change that mindset that now presentations become a business strategy? That I'm not just going in and doing it at this one time, but let's look across all the places where you have these different moments and how are you approaching them strategically so you can get the most results possible.
Wow, that's awesome. So how are you getting it to stick? Because a big problem when we train people, okay, we teach them something, then we go away, and like 2 weeks goes by, and they kind of already forgot what we taught them. You know what I mean? It's like, and if you're hitting all these different points, and to that thing, I know, like with COVID. So you've been doing this since pre-COVID, all that stuff. But even in the early 2000s, you didn't have Zoom. You didn't have easy accessibility for video conferencing, unless you're a real high level. There might have been some form, right? But it was really difficult. I remember I got on Zoom first in like 2013. It was horrible. Okay, it was just grainy and it cut off all the. I mean, it was. I mean, I'm glad they hung in there because now here we are. But like that was really difficult. So having to travel and either do it in person, or we do phone or whatever is really interesting. Ways we had to adapt. And then now we're kind of there's no going back. I do live stream virtual training as well, right? So I live stream it and I train people, 2 hours at a time and different things, and I love it because because it's leverage,
Yeah.
So, but when I look at training, a lot of times, what I always found that, and you've done this so long, you probably have the answer here, but I just don't, stuff doesn't seem to stick with people. You get an hour, you get 2 hours, you get 3 hours, or you get a weekend, and then there's methods I know that, that make it stick. So did you find that to be an issue?
Yeah, so stickiness changes kind of where you are on what I call the presentation spectrum, because we have a tendency to lump presentations and speeches and training all into the same bucket.
Right.
And that's a key piece that when I work with individuals, I have to pull out where they are along this line. And this because they could be in different places, but thinking about the moment we're going into, are you on one side where you have 45 minutes, 20 minutes, and you're a keynote? You're just talking at them. You're more in the true public speaking realm. Or maybe you're on the complete other side, which is you're a teacher, a facilitator, a trainer. And the reason I pull those two on the different sides is because the cognitive load, throw a training term out there, but the load that the audience has placed on them is very different. And so how we measure results as the keynote public speaker versus the trainer changes, because on the one end, if the audience is entertained and if they remember just one thing, and if they implement it, if they don't implement it, but if they just generally enjoyed it and it was something in that moment in time that just made them feel good and they feel like they walked away and you even get a standing ovation, that's amazing. But how do we judge results in that place? We judge results, to quote a mentor of mine, he goes, it's not standing ovations, it's standing invitations. Am I getting invited back, and am I getting invited back? So a key piece, if you're living in that space, to make it sticky and rememberable is actually part of my first phase of my system, which is that is the first thing we figure out. We don't start at the top and make an outline. We actually sit down and we say, what is the one thing, like a chorus in a song? They can't remember the verse, but if they can remember the chorus and they can see you a month later, they'll belt it back out at you. What is that? What's that remember statement? What's that 7 to 10 words? And some people call them foundational phrases. They'll use different terminology, but that is a key piece, because once we know that and we know what we want the audience to do, then we can start writing the content. And that
Gotcha.
shifts when we're over on the other side.
Right.
Um, and then, of course, the middle part is where we live in the business world. I call it the messy middle, Richard, because we have to know, are we going more over here and the audience is listening? Are we going more over here to training because the results there are I changed their skills? I can see from now and going forward, they're growing and gaining whatever skills I need. And that's what I'm looking at from a results perspective.
Well, I think it's great you've developed these metrics because I think if you didn't have a method to measure it, it's a little foo-foo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, if it wasn't for me, that kind of thing. But when you're coming with it, I call it a methodology, right? I created the methodology so that it's very, it's regimented. We know how to go and what we're looking for, how we know what success is and everything else. I think that's really important for people, especially when they're engaging in training. On the other, you're training me. Okay. I also need to know, am I getting better?
Mm-hmm.
Because like you're going along, you're listening and depending, and that's why you've mastered what you do because I've been to places where they're training, they're so high level and there's just, it's a lot of, and I have this weird brain where I'm trying to make it practical. I get in those where I'm like, well, how would I apply that? Like, that's not even real.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get some people who just, they get up and they talk theory. Okay. And great if it's a theory convention. Okay. But I don't go to theory conventions. I go to practical thing. Yeah. I need stuff to apply in my business right now and whatever. But a lot of times you get like, they're not able to break it down and make it practical enough so that it makes sense in the kind of an, I'm going to air quote average way, but and I don't like lowest common denominator either. I don't want to make it, just straight dumb, but I really got to find that sweet spot where they're engaged, but I can measure, are they getting this, or they can measure, can they take it home and use it?
Absolutely. And one of the things I pride myself in is, and this actually, I'm quoting back somebody that said it to me, is they're like, Patty, you know how to find the baseline of where that individual is and identify their next best 10% and communicate it to them in a way where they understand exactly why it's their next best 10%, the journey we're going to take to get there, or the method, the framework, the system, But then they're going to be able to walk away from me. They're not going to be dependent on me. I'm going to
Right.
equip them enough that they're going to be able to go, oh, yeah, I did that really well. Or nope, I got to pick up the phone and call Patty. I'm struggling in that moment. And that is part of my method. And I have 3 phases. I've learned that you've got to clarify first. And then you can go into creation. And then you got to do your capture piece, which is capturing your confidence and doing your practice sessions and all those things that you need to do in the moment to make sure you do really well. And I kind of laugh because a lot of times, if there's anything people want to dog on in the process and the method, and then they wonder why they don't get results, is they don't want to practice.
Right.
I'm like, really?
Are you
What
supposed to
NBA
practice? Are you
athlete is
supposed
gonna
to?
just like run out there and go, "What? I won the championship and I never practiced once."
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, we get that a lot. Yeah. It's always, as I raise my kids in sports and boxing and running and whatever it was, gymnastics, always you practice like you play.
yeah,
Like we go hard, all the time. There's no easy practices. You know what I mean? We put in the time, we put in the reps, we put in the hours, so that, and on the field is another thing. Just being a Marine, my son's a Marine now too, but you only perform to your last highest level of training. So whatever you've trained, practiced, that's when the lights go on, that's the best you're going to be.
mhm.
Okay. And most people, when they don't train, guess where you're going to be
Uh,
at that didn't train level. Okay. So you're not going to do well. And it's one of those things, if you can have that as a takeaway when you're training, that's why, like my wife, okay, you'll appreciate this because of what you do. I often listen to my podcasts. Okay. Like you and I have this interview and I'll listen to it when we get done. I'll go through that. I'll go through another one. Or when I've been on as a guest, been on hundreds of podcasts as a guest, I'll listen to them. She goes, "Are you really listening to yourself again?" Like I'm being vain. I'm like, no, I'm learning. This is how I learn. Like one time I told her, I go like, maybe I shouldn't throw my brother under the bus like that. He may actually listen to one of these someday. I've been, but you can learn simple things, but also the presentation, the pauses, right? As we try to exchange, we actually obviously don't want to talk over each other. If you've ever been on a podcast like that, that's ugly. I mean, it happens occasionally, but it's a lot. You'll get a guest who's just I they're so into presenting, the conversation's lost because they're only thinking about what they want to say and they cut you off before you're done asking the question. You know what I mean? But we've all kind
mhm.
of seen it. And I will raise my hand and say I may have been guilty of that years ago. I was so keyed up about what I do that I didn't learn the level of professionalism to conduct a real conversation between another expert.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you just said about the real conversation because that's actually a space I'm finding myself in a lot right now is helping corporations of all sizes, small all the way up to multi-million dollar organizations, and even one is larger than that. But their sales teams are struggling of knowing when do I go, you talk about the spectrum I talked about a moment ago, when do I go into demo mode and I need to talk here, I got this slide deck that they tell me I have to use, and how do I go into that presenting mode? But then how do I switch really quickly and go to the other side of the spectrum where I'm now a facilitator and I'm in discovery mode and I'm opening it for a conversation? And how do I seamlessly go between these skill sets of facilitation, conversation, and then true telling and giving the information that I need to give in this situation and using the slides to do both because a lot of times they want that visual support. And that's a skill that a lot of people that I'm finding, one, they haven't been trained the differences between the two to understand, to even know when they're in one of them. So because they don't know the differences between the two, they're not able to identify when they listen back to their calls because so many of their sales calls are recorded. So then they're asked to go back and listen to them, but they don't even know how to improve.
Right. I'm so glad you do that because I would do done few sales presentations for companies. I build them, brand them to their thing. I give them all the video. Here's everything. Learn this. But it was really about that process when you're doing what? If you have
Mm-hmm.
a repeatable process and you're selling, we craft it to fit. So not that you're going to be a robot, but like you'll see that line on the slide that comes up, right? Maybe it's okay, this is where you ask this question, and the question is open-ended question is going to generate a response. Now you may take a little bit of time in the conversation to go back and forth, and then you can return to the presentation. So it is a challenge, but when you can flow in and out like that, they get super comfortable. Okay. And they get very trusting because you're just this guy and talk about this and this. Because when you just info dump on them, I mean, they glaze over. They don't care
Yeah.
about all the features. They want the benefits or whatever it might be, right? But it really is that, and it's not overselling, meaning you talk too much, right? There's that balance because a lot of people, I tell a lot of people, well, you sell a lot, you don't close a lot. We really looking for closers. So you talk too much. So like, well, you got to get that balance, which is probably what you're finding, right? How do you really, how do you train them to have that awareness? It's really awareness, right? Kind of where they're
Yeah.
at in the flow.
Yeah, and especially in organizations that have really long sales cycles.
Right.
It's a long process to decide, are we going to bring on your product or not? Are we going to bring in your service? Is it on our roadmap? Is it not on our roadmap? So there's a lot of steps in these more complex sales cycles. And that was, of course, rewind to 2011, I never thought, oh my gosh, that, having presentation strategy and skills in these long sales cycles. And then how do we measure results? Well, have we shrunk the cycle? Are we discovering up front more of the obstacles? Are we really getting that shovel out and really going, okay, well, you say this is a roadblock, but I guarantee you there's something more in your organization that I need to know about. And I'm going to just keep digging deeper and digging deeper and doing it in a way that then, of course, is ideally getting them to say yes to you because they're probably going up against multiple different solutions. Which one are we going to go with given our problem that we have at our organization? But that has been something that I have really enjoyed as of late because what I'm finding with a lot of the tech companies that I work with, they're subject matter experts in some sort of capacity, but now they're put in a sales situation.
Right.
And that doesn't always fit real well, or they don't have that naturally. And so that has been a joy to equip people in that type of space as subject matter experts, not just on the stage at a conference, but now in the sales process.
Yeah, you get a tech guy who wants to, and I've noticed some weird things. This is really weird. Not really off point here, but people like who work on the computers a lot. I'm noticing like we have co-working space. They're in the dark. I walked into a business the other day. They got the big roll-up window. Big. And there's two people. The lights are off in the office. The one guy's like working on his laptop, and the reception girl's like on her phone. Okay, doing that. I kind of walked in. I go, "Are we taking a nap?" Because I'm like, but everyone's got everything dark. I don't know if that's something with the screen. I mean, I wear the blue light glasses and
Right.
stuff because I'm on it all day, but I can't sit in the dark. So I'm thinking about taking a tech guy who that's his whole existence or hers. They're not people. Okay,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they do code and everything else, and can be a little quirky and all that stuff. And try to bring them out of that and put them into a position where they have to present and or sell. That could be a little challenging.
Yeah, yeah, and even if you think about some of the people who they were in an organization and they solved an incredibly amazing product. I had this one client that as 3D printers were coming out and they were starting to print very complex, it was taking days. Well, he figured out the math to make it go down to 45 minutes.
Oh,
And so then I ended up getting a phone call because the CMO had seen me at a conference and knew I was the speaker coach for that conference and then brought me in to say, "Hey, Patty, I know you work with technical minded people. Our CEO needs some assistance." Because he was just like, "Well, why would you want my product, dummy?" I mean, it was that direct. And
right.
so he was totally breaking down the human connection piece in his presentations. And I will never forget this, Richard. So we went through a 2-day workshop and we were refining their sales presentation. And then we were talking about how and when we were being strategic, how and when does the CEO come in? Because they only had two people and himself from a sales perspective. And then we talked about in your different scenarios when you're doing face to face, how do you walk a stage? How do you move? And I talked about the fact that you have three key things and phases that this printer goes through in order to get the results that it does. So you're going to stand on the audience's left and talk about the first phase, and you're not going to move. You're just going to stand there. You're going to do slight gestures. And then you're going to slowly transition to the second phase and stand in the middle. And then you're going to slowly transition to the third phase. And then when they ask you questions about any of the phases, please slowly go stand at that location because you're automatically communicating without you realizing it. And plus, I needed to get him to quit moving. He was like
Right.
the
Right.
wandering tiger kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he's practicing this. And we're in the back of the room. It's day 2 of the workshop. And we're in the back of the room. And the gal who brought me in leans over and goes, Patti, that is the best he has ever looked. And no, I don't even think it was 2.5 seconds after she said that. He stops completely, drops the F bomb, and goes, This is the most effing uncomfortable I have ever been in my life. And fortunately, the CMO pipes up and goes, I don't care because you look amazing. Whatever Patti says to do, keep doing it.
Yeah.
But it was so, but we have to still respect that it was so uncomfortable for him. I mean, it would be like me becoming a ballerina.
Right.
Like I'm 6 foot tall and play basketball and volleyball. I guarantee you I can't become a ballerina. It's just not for me. Could I potentially? Maybe. But that's how uncomfortable he was feeling. But I appreciated that he said it out loud. But then I was able to meet him where he was and say, okay, your mind's thinking this, but let's break down the formula. This is why it's working and why your CMO just said. And because then he gave me more buy-in when I could dissect it in a way that he could understand it. But those are even some of those little results we look at too, is like from a strategy perspective, it's not just the content coming in, but then how are we strategic when we deliver it in a way that's going to build as much connection as possible, leave you as memorable as possible. And then ideally, of course, the end goal, like you said, we got to be a closer. What's the result we're going for right now? It may not be to close the sale, it may be to build an advocate. But what is it are we going after? And did we measure that result in some way?
Yeah, I think that's critical. Really knowing the target. What's the outcome? Understanding
Mm-hmm.
what the outcome of this, because you can get up and wax eloquently all day, but to what avail?
Yeah.
Like if you don't know, you're just gonna talk about myself. That was fun. What do you think? Just tell me how great I am. Like, I don't know, go to the table in the back and sign up for something. I don't know, drop 2 grand. I do something. But you gotta have a thing to do. You have to have something, because I think, and let me know your thoughts on this. I think if you don't do that, you've disappointed the audience. Everybody wants more. You can give your best speech, give all your greatest stuff you've ever done, and told them how and do that, all that. They're still going to believe you have more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're never done. No one believes you're going to give everything, even though you do, but they're going to want more. They're always going to want what's next. So I always try to help people, like, you have to have that built out. Like, where are they going from here? Because they're never more interested in the moment they're sitting in front of you. I kind of do it with phone calls too. When people call me to ask about this or that, it's like they're never more interested than that point. So you have to be ready to respond there. So when you're on the stage, if you don't have that, oh, you're disappointing a lot of people, and
Yeah.
you're going to maintain a different level of poverty. Okay.
Yeah.
they,
Well,
they
and
like
even
you.
if
They
that's
want to
a,
share their money with you.
yeah. And to your point, Richard, it could be a big stage like we think of, the big conference stages. But that stage could be you're right now in a sales call and I'm sitting in hopefully not that dark room, like you said. Hopefully they have some lights on and people can see them. But that's still a presentation moment. And I have really been using that term, that idea of presentation moment a lot lately, because a lot of times people don't even realize that it was a key moment in that sales cycle. They didn't
Right.
realize that was a key handshake. They didn't realize that that networking event they went to or that email that they just sent off, like they didn't realize that, whoa, whoa, whoa. Before I just jump right into this and wing it, let's pause a moment. Am I walking into something where I need to be a little bit more strategic right now and I need to communicate a little more strategic and I need to be thinking about that next step? Because in my first phase of my method, what I call the clarify phase, we blueprint your presentation, but we start at the very end. And I already told you about one of the questions was what do we want them to remember? But you just hit the next one. What do we want the audience to do? And it's one thing, not 1,000 things.
Yes.
What
Amen.
is the one thing that we want the audience to do? And it has to be specific enough that we can measure it.
Yep.
And so and that came about because what I was finding when I was talking with people earlier on in when I started my business is I would say, so how did you know your last presentation went well? Tell me about your last presentation. They're like, oh, it was great. I got a standing ovation. I said, okay, that's great. How do you know? Like, why did they stand up? Is that because their seats were cold? But what result can you measure beyond that that says, yes, I gave them what I needed to? So to your point, was it book sales? Okay, we can measure that. Was it, I got invited back to this many people? I can measure that. So for example, one of the things that's really hard for me to measure sometimes are panel discussions. And so whenever I'm a moderator of a panel, one of the key things is I want to dismiss my panelist. And I always share with the audience, the panelists are going to be standing over here. They're going to be spread out a little bit so you can talk to them. Please feel you don't have to rush out. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm paying attention to how many people stayed in the room the whole time. I'm paying attention to how much did they lean in, but how many people flocked to those panelists? Because that's a really good indication for me that we did a good job. And then did they do their job of exchanging business cards or whatever they need to? So we have some sort of measurable results. Now, if I see people leaving the room and I don't see them flocking to the panelists, then I feel like either the panelists or myself as the moderator didn't do our job. But that's the level of results, or when we say, what do we want the audience to do at the end? When I'm coaching, rather it's whole teams or individuals, I say, close your eyes a second. Picture you've gotten to the end. What is the audience doing? Are they running out the door? Are they coming up to you? Are they going onto their computer or their phone and downloading a white paper? What is that? Put yourself in that space. And once we know what that is and we know your remember statement, now we can go and reverse engineer this using my blueprint process and say, now we can figure out your content that we need to include that's going to drive to that.
That's right.
Once we have your content, then we'll figure out your opening.
Right. Yeah, it's the whole reverse engineer concept's usable in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do it in exit strategies? Right. We go to the end and we work our way backwards. We figure everything out, and this, and just like speaking, it's the same thing. What's my outcome? I'm giving one tomorrow. I'm giving a lunch and learn. And I'm wrapping it up, today because, I'm a big prepper, but it's, but I know what I'm going for. Right. So I understand that. And I did the same thing. I kind of walked backwards with it. How am I going to open, and then, when am I wrapping up the end? And this is just business owners. We're doing a thing on AI in business, it's real low level in a good way, right? Like how do you, service contractors, things like that. People don't understand how to, everyone sees AI, but they don't get like the basic applications that are out there. They think you have to be a Fortune 500 to use it. So we have to walk through that, right? So the whole goal is just to share this information, okay, to have a great, there's gonna be 25, 30 people there. So not a huge room, but I can do a slide, do everything else, just walk them through it. And my goal for this is only that they understand and they can go install or implement some of these tactics I'm giving them. That's the only outcome I want, because of who it is and everything else. I'm just doing this not as it's for, what would you call it? Authority. Okay. So yeah, I'm up there. It's another thing. It's going to be videotaped, all that stuff. I want it for the recording. I'll be honest. That's why I'm doing it, because I can videotape the whole thing. I got the mic, I got the whole deal. I want it for the recording because I can use that and I can chop that up and they can use that, for years to come. Right. So love them helping these people. Well, my goal for them is to take it, have something very practical they can go implement and make progress, make money. Right. For me, I'm literally looking for the recording. So it kind of, to me, it's a win-win. I think it's good.
Yeah. And I would encourage you as you're doing that, what's your remember statement? What's those 7 to 10 words? So I just did a keynote on January 18th. I was a closing keynote for a conference. And I knew I hit it because for the rest of the emails that I got afterwards were like, Patti, I have changed my mindset. It's no more presentations, it's resultations. Because that was my remember statement. Is I was like, when we walk into presentations, we think, oh, I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my thing. But if I change my mindset, and we know from learning that if we give a word to that mindset, it has more meaning. So I have come up with the word resultation, because just saying that word alone, people start thinking, ooh, I have an outcome in this moment that maybe I want to go after, or maybe it's an outcome I don't want to lose. I want to protect the outcome in that moment. And so my whole presentation was about, we walk into all these different opportunities. There's a lot of mix of different business people in the room. So I was a little generic about presentation moment, but I said, you're going to have moments and they're just going to float you by and you're going to regret it later. Where instead, if you would pause and rather take 5 minutes or 5 days, depending on how important this is, and take a resultation mindset, get really clear. Once you're really clear and you can see that blueprint, like an architect, you don't just go dig a hole. You got to have the whole blueprint. You got to know where the foundation's going.
Right.
Then you can go into the next phase, which is create. And Richard, so many people make the mistake of opening the laptop or opening AI now, and they go into the create phase. But they haven't clarified. So junk into AI is junk out,
That's right.
where in the past, it was they spent way too much time dinkering with their slides.
Well,
Um,
I'll be demonstrating that tomorrow.
okay,
You'll like, I'm
I
giving
would
some
like
really
that.
like, here's your no prep resume. Your employers say, I really cool. I have a bunch of different, comparisons on that kind of stuff because you're exactly right. I tell people with chat or Grok or whatever you guys like, you got to be awake.
Mhm.
Okay, you got to pay attention to what you're doing. It doesn't do everything for you. It'll be absolutely horrible. I get so many pitches, okay, to be on my show, and they're all AI generated. I can smell them within the first 3 words,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, I don't even read them. I mean, that's how fast I become like hypersensitive to the stuff. Now, if they would just take an extra 2 minutes and if it let it generate its thing and then say what's wrong with it, personalize it this way, give it a couple prompts, they'll have an amazing little opening. But they're taking the first thing it gives them. And I always tell people this, Patty, AI is built by humans. So you guaranteed it'll do two things: lie and it's lazy. Okay.
Ooh, L
So
squared.
that's what it is. Okay, I'm telling, and I've been in it for thousands of hours, and I know what it does. But you're absolutely right. I love that you're bringing this up because it's all work. We all really have to understand our audience, understand our outcomes, like you're talking about. But when I use it now, it's just I keep roasting it down. I do this. It's not whatever it gives me first is like it's horrible. I mean, you're
Mhm.
starting with garbage, but it's better than a blank page. But then
Mhm.
you got to start picking it apart. So if you think you can just hit enter and have something, it doesn't work that way. At least not to any level that someone would want to actually listen to you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And that's what I found in 2025. So the my the clarify phase, that first phase, which I could literally train on for 2 whole days. I'm so passionate about it and it's so meaningful. And it's really, I mean, I had one gentleman's like, Patty, I would have wished I would have met you 30 years ago. Like you would have saved me so much time and energy because you just get me to clarity so quickly through that first phase of my method. But then what's really cool is once we've done that, that's where we have found that AI can be a huge blessing because it can cut down how quickly we
Right.
can get to a script or cut down how quickly we can get to slides or whatever the case may be. But that's because golden nuggets are going in, golden nuggets and reduction of time in that second phase is coming out. But I've also really pushed people in the creation phase to say, do you need slides anyway? What about a good old fashioned front to back handout that's really well designed? Like our brain still needs to write. Like you talked, one of the first things we talked about in our conversation was how do we get sticky and remember? Well, we can't just do one modality of the brain. So that's another thing I push people on too is when we're working. Yeah, you're verbally saying something, but are you doing something tactical, hands on that you can feel and see and touch? But are you also giving any opportunity to do something visual? But of course, it has to have purpose. It has to have meaning and it all has to connect together so it feels cohesive. Like, I'm not just gonna, like, I can't tell you. Oh my gosh. So, I had a speaker of mine. She did this amazing opening where she ripped up, she gave everybody $10,000 bills. And then she stood up and she said, how many of you, and she ripped it up and she dropped it. And she said, how many of you are giving that away every single day and you don't know it? And then, of course, her whole talk went into it. Well, somebody that had been in that audience had seen her opening and they were like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. So she tried to do one. But the problem is she, and my client told me, she's like, Patty, I know what she was trying to do, but she didn't connect it to the remember statement. So it didn't open and it kind of felt flat. And I'm like, I wonder if she had AI just generate some ideas for her and she just picked the one that she kind of
Yeah.
liked without thinking it all the way through.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm seeing for me, I'm seeing when I get these speeches like, Patty, I've gotten version one. And I'm to the point now, Richard, I said, no, you don't have version one. You have version whatever AI told you is version one.
Right.
You haven't even clarified enough to even
Yeah.
know, is this right? Is it not right? Is it going to connect? Is it not going to connect? And if we can figure out those, then you can give AI more guidance to say, you missed here, but this is on the right track. So if you can adjust that, and then to your point, Richard, what it kicks out next is amazing.
Yeah.
Then that's the creation phase. And then when we go to the last phase, which is capture, so they're all C's: clarify, create, capture. And I call it capture because at the end of it, I got to capture the results and I got to capture my confidence. But I can only do that if I practice and I rehearse. And I layer it because not everybody's going to get to the top of our skill sets with our delivery. But if we can get words and voice variants and
Yeah.
pausing, I'm happy with that, even if we don't
Yeah.
get to gestures and movement.
Yeah, I'm big on that. I run through my stuff a lot. What I've also learned, I like having a slide presentation, but I keep it pretty minimal because
Mm-hmm.
it's only for me. Really, it's telling what I'm going to talk about next. So I'll do the pictures, all the stuff. Way back in the day, I have remember the slides, the actual slides. You put them in a carousel and did that. So we used to say, okay, it's about a minute per slide. If you show a slide, you got about a minute to talk. So I'm like, I talk pretty fast. So I said, okay, probably 30, 45 seconds. But I have a full carousel and I built custom water features. So they're just beautiful pictures for the most part, right? And I just hit the button, they pop up, and I go, oh, I remember that job. And I would just talk about the job, and we just cruised through the stuff, kept it really simple, but I needed the cue. I
Mm-hmm.
just need a cue all the time. So even this thing tomorrow, it's not overly fancy. It's simple. It's short, but it says everything it has to say, even though it's short, right? So they can see it, but I talk about it, and I expand and I expand and I expand. I go with that. So it's really me I want them paying attention to, not the slides. The slides is like my backup, and look, I'm a half professional. I can put words on the slide. So I'm doing that, and it's like, but it really helps me to improve my presentation because I train a lot. I practice. I want to know it. I go through it. I write it. I read it. Out loud, all that kind of stuff. I'll do that. I don't try to memorize anymore. I used to be really good at memorizing. I kind of stopped doing that. Okay. Because I got comfortable with what I know
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to hit every point. And this is another point about chat and AI. It's going to write, when you get it, it's going to be really awesome when you get to that point, right? And you're like, but then I got to say all of that, because it's so good. I look at it sometimes like, I can't leave a word out. It's perfect. After you spend all these drill downs with it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do I do that? So then I actually have to go back in and say, okay, it's good, but I need fewer words. How would I say it this way? And you can keep working with that. That's the speed aspect you're talking about. You can do that, and they can really. It's like if it's not Patty Schutte, but if you were here, that's what you and I'd be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like back and forth. But on this, I can get to a point where it's like it's presentable. And if I have extra time, I can go even deeper, and it's helpful, but I'm not memorizing that,
Oh.
because I don't have the time. I mean, I'm kind of
Well,
smart, but I don't have time to memorize like a 45-minute, hour long thing.
oh, well, and you just nailed on the head. You shouldn't memorize it
Right.
because if you're really going into that training phase where you're going in and you're talking for an hour, there's got to be audience interaction. That
Oh, I
has to
love.
be built. They just can't sit there for a whole hour, and then
Okay.
you can't be
I
memorized because what if they answer in a way that you
this
need to adjust?
this is awesome. Okay, so I'm so glad you said this. Okay, because this is what I'm great at. I don't just lecture. I remember once I was doing this one with a bunch of contractors, right, for this water feature building. There's, I don't know, maybe 150 guys in there. I see some guy dozing off. Swoop, I'm off the stage. I cruise over to him, and I'm still talking to everybody. Get next to the guy, kind of hit him with my knee. He wakes up. I go, "We keeping you up, my man? Come on with me, man. I want to show you something up on stage." And I'd get him up and bring him up on stage and ask him questions, do this stuff, put him back down. I just have a lot of fun with the audience.
Yeah.
But I really like that's feedback, right? Those are new cues, and now they're engaged because they're listening, and maybe they got a question and they start raising their hands. That changes the whole event, right? And now that's where you get your great takeaways, and that's where you get your great examples because you're never going to think of what they're thinking of.
Yeah.
So I'll do a hot seat a lot of times too. I love it. Bring someone up, sit down, ask me questions. What are you doing with this? And they just back and forth. And solve that problem. Okay, you go get the next one, and just totally off the cuff. There's so much fun.
Yeah.
When people hear that stuff, but everyone is leaning forward, and listening. It's really cool. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think if you don't do that, I mean, I get it. Do you know who Andy Andrews is?
Hmm.
Okay, now that man can speak. Okay.
Yes.
I saw him in '09. Yeah. Yeah, '09 and 2010. He's all over the place. What one of the funniest thing he did was, I don't know if you ever, but he's like, so he comes off stage and he's talking to people and he asks some guy, "What's your name?" And the guy says, "Oh, it's Tony." He goes, "Oh, my dad's name was Tony." And everyone's like, "Oh, that's cool." And he goes and talks to the next person, another one. And then he asks another guy, he goes, "What's your name?" The guy goes, "Oh, it's Richard." He goes, "My dad's name was Richard." And he does this, like, and he does, people still go, "Well," you know what I mean? But he can just kind of float around the room and the way he can tell stories and everything else. I mean, he's really one of those super enjoyable speakers
Yeah.
who can just engage a room of 500-600 people effortlessly. It's
Yeah.
really
Well,
impressive.
he gets in there with the audience.
Right.
He gets there in there with them.
Right.
And that's the human connection element that
Yep.
I like to say, but how are we connecting human to human? How are we getting, even if we're virtual, like, how are we getting and leaning into each other as we're having this conversation? And looking for those cues and thinking, what open-ended question could potentially come next. And of course, we're in a true conversation setting.
Right.
This isn't a sales setting or, anything like that. But it still goes to your point is when you see it and you feel it and you experience it, wherever along that presentation spectrum it may occur, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And once you can sense that, then a lot of the clients I work with, they're like, Patti, I know this person is good. I said, well, what do you like about them? Let's dissect that a little bit. And then how can we take what's your authentic, because you can't become that person. You're you. So
Right.
let's take your authenticity, but let's figure out how to make you brilliant in your authenticity. And once I've dissected it, I had somebody one time, they're like, Patti, I now can no longer listen to this one gentleman who's the VP of our organization because I know right away all the things they've done wrong. And I'm like, well, then that's when you need to train your brain to listen to just one thing that you can take
Right.
away from that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Uh,
see that off. They're imitating others. They saw
yeah.
someone do a sermon and they take it like verbatim. I'm like, I get ideas are ideas, but come on, man. Make it your own at least. Okay. Find a little way. Don't, not to the exact thing. So that, that's a little disingenuous. But I'm with you. I have to interact with the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong being on stage. Okay. That's where you start. Right. But then you come down, or in or whatever, or back and forth, or literally call on people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done that at different things they do. And people like, you just call on them. Like if people are kind of quiet, you just get one person talking and the whole room lights up.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to get one. And I just ask them a question. So I give them something to answer to and they do it. Then the next person raises their hand and goes around the room. And now you got a conversation for the next 45 minutes, with different people and they're engaging and bringing the different insights. And I'm up there mediating, but also
Mm-hmm.
giving the right answers and everything else, just demonstrating my expertise. And those are and people remember you. Like, look at me, I'm talking about Andy Andrews from 2009.
Yep.
Okay, that's a memorable thing. It's like that's what you want, right? That's a great outcome. Like you said, he got invited back.
Right. Well, because at the end of it too, you made them feel something.
Right.
So that's my third question that I always start with people. What do you want your audience to most remember? Your 7 to 10 words. What do you want them to do that we can measure? But how do you want them emotionally feeling? What is that human connection piece now? And it doesn't always have to be positive and uber gruber exciting because sometimes it could be you want them super uncomfortable because you want them to learn more about your product. But we do talk about what do you want them to remember, what do you want them to do, and how do you want them feeling at the end. And that's what we get really crystal clear on because so often they miss that human connection piece. And that's when we really remember people, is because to your point, what you said earlier, I now have something that I'm going to remember that I see you from a words perspective, 7 to 10 words that I now have drilled and stuck to my mind. You've given me something to do next. So it felt like my time with you was well worth it. And you made me feel a certain way that I'm not going to forget. And when all those things come magically together, and then you start your opening and your content, and it's all woven in, that's when magic happens in whatever your presentation moment, your presentation setting is. And so I appreciate what you said about that feeling piece and bringing up that example from
Well,
2009, because you definitely had a
I,
human connection.
yeah, I think what you're saying, the clarifying you, those three points you have, here's the thing, and I'm sure you know this because it's your thing, but if I had those three things specifically, right, I can then weave a story inside there,
Hmm.
right, including the product. If I had a
Yep.
product, I could weave the story and make all that flow together and get that outcome. But if you're missing those three things, your story doesn't kind of go anywhere. It's not connecting to anything. So I really like that technique because I always, you want to weave a story in there, but you want to hit those points. Like let's say you start the show, whoa, when we get done, you're going to know this, this, and this, and this, which is a good technique, right? This you set anticipation, but now it's the delivery of that. How are you going to pull that off so they know? So when you do hit a bump, so we hit this and this and this, and they all know it, they felt it, and they're like raising their hand, right, to buy or whatever that is. That's the challenge, right? So, but I think with the way you do it, I really like that. I really like that structure because then you're solid on your pillars. So, like your pillars, right? And the rest is ornamentation. Okay, you can just dress it up and make it good and flow it down. But as long as you hit those big points, those big anchors, those pillars, people are going to have solid stuff to take away.
Yeah, and what it ended up doing is it ended up being a measuring stick that I could hold people accountable to as I was working with them. And then we got to the create phase, and as we kept the work going, because we had agreed this is our do remember feel, then all of a sudden that became our tool that we can say, does this stay or does this go? Is this needed? Is this not needed? Because if it doesn't drive directly to that, to those pillars, then it's fluff.
Right.
We don't have time for fluff. 99% of the time we don't have time for fluff. I mean, unless we're blessed with 2 days and maybe we can
Yes,
throw in a
I'm a,
little
I'm a
fluff. But
non-fluffer. I'm a
yeah,
non-fluffer.
yeah,
My last
yeah,
book was 97 pages, and that included all the pages, the blank ones and the copyright one, everything else. It's a field manual. So it's a
yeah,
how-to. Okay, no
yeah.
fluff.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and that's what, and I feel so honored now that I get to do this as, like I've taken everything I've learned, I've taken the process, and I now have an opportunity to work with so many different individuals, from solopreneurs to business to big startups, and just have a conversation about thinking about presentation strategically so you feel more confident and you're getting better results. I mean, that just fuels me with so much excitement when I can see that. From whoever I work with. And they walk in going, I know what I need to do now. Like I know it's no longer feeling like just like I hope for the best.
Well, they say public speaking is the number one fear in all the world. They fear it more than death. Okay, people fear more than death. But to attribute to your accomplishment to this point, something people have to remember: look how much time you have in the game. So you did two things: you stayed in the game, you evolved inside the game. Okay, you saw problems and you created solutions for them, still in your lane, right? And you're able to
Mhm.
take that and grow that. And that's what a lot of people miss in business, Patty. They don't. They want to be so linear, like, and I get it. Okay, the main thing has got to be the main thing, to certain points. But then you get to the point where the train is going, right? And if a freight train's going 70 miles an hour, it takes like a mile and a half to stop. It's got momentum. So you got to get your momentum up, but then you get to start to watch what you're passing, right? You start to
Mhm.
see the opportunities, the spokes on the hub, so to speak, right? And that's what you did. You started pulling help with this person with this person with that. You created your little methodology. Now that can be applied in all these different avenues. See, so really cool how that your hub is basically your system and your methodology, but you can go out and help all these different, they're all doing what you do, just in different venues, if you will, right, or different applications. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, it is exactly how I see it. Yeah. And it goes back to how I started off my journey. I just kept being curious and saying yes and going, well, where could this go next? And how could this look? And how can I stay nimble, I guess might be the way to look
Yep.
at it. But yeah, you summarized that really well.
Yeah, it's just important. People, it doesn't matter if it's public speaking or you're a plumber. I don't care what it is. Okay, like you need to have that attitude um, when you have a business, and not that you want to become Amazon, but
Right.
that you want to be relevant. Okay, you want to be relative. Okay, and you want to own your region. You want to kind of dominate your space, and that should always be the thing because I was trying to tell people you take your foot off the gas, you slow down, right? You put it on the gas, you go forward. So there's only two directions the business goes. It goes forward or it goes backwards. There's no maintenance. There's no coasting. You can call it cruise control, but that doesn't work either. You come up behind someone and you crash, because I did that once.
That's a
Letting
story for
cruise
another
control
day.
drive. So yeah. But all was well. But I just love what you've done, how you've taken all the expertise and then stacked it and applied it in these different areas. And that's a big takeaway here, I think, for people to understand. Like, look at your business that way. You're not doing what Patty's doing, maybe, but you're doing something like that. And that's what makes business interesting and, dare I say, fun. Okay, it really is, because you start figuring this stuff out. And because if you just had to go and do this, clean the same carpets every single day, right? Eventually, okay, this is my life. Okay, no, you hire someone. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Do this, and make this stuff happen. But like you said, stay curious. Staying curious on what you have. How do you apply it? And it could be an entirely different business. But again, it can ebb and flow that way all the time. Or we're always having the little pivots. There's always the little pivots in our business. Adjusting. 2020 was a big one. That wasn't a pivot. That was like a 180. Okay, you had to do some serious figuring out. During that time. I mean, it was nuts. And I was ready to really move forward on one thing. And these people I was kind of teaming up with, like, no, I don't think it's the right time. I go, no, it's the time to help businesses. Everything is shutting. I mean, hundreds of thousands of businesses went under. I go, we could have helped a lot of those people, at that time. But they didn't, they're not thinking that way. You know what I mean? They're kind of you got to be careful what's around you, that it affects you. You got to kind of stay in your own path. I think don't shun counsel. When people want to have legit, input and stuff, you want to listen to that, but you still got to be pretty solid on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Know that it's the right counsel or not.
That's it. That's why that's why they say a multitude of counselors is a good thing. Not one counselor. That's one opinion, and that's probably going to be wrong. So yeah, that's awesome. Well, Patty, what a great conversation. This is so awesome. And you even helped me for tomorrow. See that? I'm going to do that much better.
Yeah, you need that remember statement, those 7 to 10 words that they're going to remember.
I think I have them. I have to check my slides, though, because there's probably on my slides. I got limited bandwidth, to memorize that much stuff. But no, that's an awesome one. So how do people get in touch with you? Maybe they want to hire you, bring you into their organization, and do the magic that you do.
Yeah, so definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my primary place that I like to connect with people, but go to my website. It's Be Brilliant Presentation Group. Rather long, but just spelled traditionally, Be Brilliant presentationgroup.com. And you can find tons of information. There's an opportunity to schedule a chat with me. And you won't get one of my salespeople. That's not part of our process. You will literally get me. We'll have a chat and we'll talk about your presentation needs. We'll talk about how presentation strategy may be a benefit to you, but there's also a free micro course that you can sign up for if you would like. And so LinkedIn and my website, and it's Patti Schutte, and I know they'll be able to see it when you post all this, and BeBrilliantPresentationGroup.com.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I really appreciate all the time today. This is good stuff.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. So we'll have to stay in touch. I want to see all the great things you're doing, turning all these people into, legit speakers and presenters. I love it. So cool. Well, that has been awesome. Again, thank you very much. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next STS podcast. Thanks for joining me on the Sharpen the Spear podcast. If you're a manufacturing executive and you're serious about unlocking hidden profit, improving frontline leadership, and taking control of your floor, go to grit2lead.com right now. Run the free Sharpened Impact Simulator and discover your biggest opportunities are hiding. Don't leave millions on the table. Sharpen your spear, lead from the front, and win the floor. Until next time, stay sharp.